Kill the woman. The furious roar shattered the elegant music, echoing through the crystal ballroom. Dozens of armed men reached beneath tailored jackets with terrifying precision. Pistols appeared almost simultaneously, their black barrels aimed at a single, unsuspecting woman standing in the center of the crowd. Champagne glasses froze halfway to guests' lips. Politicians instinctively stepped backward. Billionaires lowered their eyes. Even rival mafia leaders stopped breathing. Everyone knew exactly what happened when someone crossed Lorenzo De Luca. No one survived. Yet the woman standing before him had no idea why the room had suddenly fallen silent. I'm terribly sorry," she said softly, reaching forward uncertainly with one hand. "Someone bumped into me. Did I spill something? Are you hurt?" She couldn't see the expensive black suit, now stained with dark red wine. She couldn't see the countless weapons surrounding her. Most importantly, she couldn't see the face of the most feared mafia boss on the East Coast. For several endless seconds, death itself seemed to pause. Then Lorenzo slowly lifted one hand. Enough. Every gun lowered instantly. The blind woman simply smiled apologetically, completely unaware that every powerful person in the ballroom had just witnessed the impossible. Why would the most ruthless man in America spare the only woman brave, or perhaps innocent enough, to walk directly into him? Earlier that evening, Lily Anderson had reminded herself that kindness never required perfect eyesight. The annual charity gala occupied one of the city's most luxurious hotels, where donations from celebrities, business leaders, judges, and philanthropists funded rehabilitation programs for people with disabilities. Lily wasn't attending as a guest. She was there to work. For the past 5 years, massage therapy had become more than a profession. It had become proof that losing her vision had not meant losing her purpose. Every movement of her hands carried quiet confidence, earned through determination, rather than sympathy. She recognized people by the rhythm of their footsteps, by the warmth in their voices, by the tension hidden beneath their muscles. Sight had disappeared from her life. Everything else had become sharper. Some guests noticed her white cane before they noticed her smile. Others whispered after seeing the plus-size woman wearing a simple navy blue dress among designer gowns worth more than her yearly salary. Lily had learned long ago not to hear pity when people tried to hide it. Instead, she greeted every client with exactly the same warmth. "Good evening," she would say. "Thank you for supporting such an important cause." Some answered kindly. Some barely acknowledged her existence. She treated them all with equal respect, because dignity was never something people earned through money. It belonged to everyone. As the evening grew busier, volunteers hurried between treatment rooms, reception tables, and fundraising displays. "Lily," called Emma, the volunteer assigned to guide her through the crowded ballroom. "I'll only be gone for a minute. One donor needs help finding the silent auction." "No problem," Lily replied with an easy smile. "I'll stay right here." Emma squeezed her shoulder before disappearing into the growing crowd. For several peaceful moments, Lily stood quietly, listening. Crystal chandeliers hummed faintly overhead through hidden ventilation. String instruments floated gently across the ballroom. Hundreds of conversations blended into one enormous river of sound. Normally, Emma returned quickly. Tonight, she didn't. Lily waited another minute, then another. Excusing herself politely, she decided to move toward what she believed was the hallway leading back to the wellness suites. Her cane tapped softly across polished marble. Left, right, forward. The ballroom had shifted as more guests arrived. Someone hurried past her. Another person brushed against her shoulder. Music echoed differently now. She paused. "I think I may have taken a wrong turn," she murmured with an embarrassed laugh. No one answered. She continued carefully. Across the ballroom, Lorenzo De Luca had just entered. Conversation died almost instantly. He never demanded attention. He simply possessed it. Tall, impeccably dressed, and surrounded by trusted capos, Lorenzo moved with the quiet certainty of a man who had never needed to prove his authority. Entire industries depended upon his decisions. Governments monitored his empire. Enemies feared speaking his name aloud. Yet Lorenzo himself appeared strangely detached from the luxury surrounding him. Another charity gala. Another room full of people pretending not to be afraid. Another evening where every smile carried hidden calculation. He accepted a glass of red wine without drinking. His dark eyes scanned the ballroom automatically. Threats. Exits. Unknown faces. Habit had replaced relaxation years ago. One of his security chiefs leaned closer. Everything is secure. Lorenzo gave a slight nod. Then something unexpected happened. A woman walked directly toward him. Not cautiously, not intentionally, simply, naturally. His guards reacted first. Hands moved toward concealed weapons. The capos stepped forward. But before anyone could stop her, she collided gently with Lorenzo's shoulder. The wine splashed across the front of his tailored jacket. The crystal glass slipped from his hand and shattered across the marble floor. Silence crashed over the ballroom. Lily gasped. "Oh no!" She instinctively reached toward where she believed the stranger stood. "I'm so sorry." Her fingers stopped just short of touching his sleeve. "I honestly didn't hear you coming." No fear, no trembling, only sincere concern. "Did the glass cut you?" she asked. "I hope you're all right." Around them, dozens of witnesses stared in complete disbelief. Someone quietly whispered, "She's dead." Another murmured, "Doesn't she know who he is?" But Lily heard only uneasy breathing surrounding her. She frowned slightly. "Is everyone okay?" Lorenzo looked at the woman before him. She wasn't acting. She truly had no idea. For the first time in longer than he could remember, someone had approached him without ambition, fear, flattery, or deceit. Only simple kindness. He studied her face. She couldn't see his wealth. She couldn't admire his appearance. She couldn't recognize the reputation that had terrified an entire criminal empire into obedience. All she knew was that another human being might have been hurt. And somehow, that simple truth unsettled Lorenzo De Luca far more than any weapon ever had. The ballroom remained unnaturally silent long after Lorenzo's single command had dissolved the threat of violence. His bodyguards lowered their weapons, but none of them lowered their guard. They watched the blind woman as though trying to understand whether she was astonishingly brave or simply unaware that she had just escaped death. Lily, however, knew nothing of the storm surrounding her. She bent carefully, hearing tiny fragments of broken crystal scattered across the marble floor. "I'm afraid I made quite a mess," she said, with an embarrassed smile. "Please don't let anyone step on the glass." One of Lorenzo's capos stared at her in disbelief. She wasn't begging for forgiveness. She wasn't crying. She wasn't trying to explain herself. She was worried that someone else might get hurt. Lorenzo spoke quietly. "Leave it." His men immediately stepped back. Then, to everyone's astonishment, he addressed Lily instead. "Are you injured?" The question caught several guests off guard. The most feared mafia boss in America had asked about the woman who had spilled wine on his custom-made suit. Lily shook her head. "I don't think so." She hesitated, before adding with genuine concern, "But your clothes may have suffered more than I did." A few nervous chuckles escaped from people who quickly regretted laughing. Lorenzo looked down at the dark stain across his jacket, then back at Lily. "It can be replaced." She smiled softly. "That's fortunate." There was no admiration in her voice, No recognition. Only relief that the accident hadn't caused serious harm, for reasons Lorenzo himself couldn't explain. He found that strangely refreshing. After ensuring Lily was reunited with Emma, Lorenzo quietly left the ballroom earlier than planned. Inside the back seat of his armored sedan, silence followed him through the city. Normally, after public appearances, his advisors reviewed security concerns, business negotiations, or intelligence reports. Tonight, no one dared interrupt his thoughts. Finally, Marco, his oldest advisor, spoke carefully. "Boss." Lorenzo didn't answer. The woman, still silence. Marco continued cautiously. "We've completed a preliminary background check." Lorenzo slowly turned his head. "Continue." "Her name is Lily Anderson. Age? 30. What does she do?" "Licensed massage therapist." Marco glanced at the tablet in his hands. "Lost her eyesight in a traffic accident 5 years ago." Lorenzo remained expressionless. No criminal record. No financial irregularities. No hidden connections. No wealthy family. No political affiliations. Marco looked genuinely puzzled. "She appears completely ordinary." Lorenzo almost smiled. Ordinary. It had been years since anyone in his world could still be described by that word. "Anything else?" Marco hesitated. Her fiancé abandoned her after she became blind. The car fell silent again. Lorenzo looked out through the tinted window at the lights flowing across the city. Power bought loyalty. Fear created obedience. Money attracted admiration. Yet none of those things had mattered to Lily Anderson. She hadn't seen any of them. 3 days later, the receptionist at the Harmony Wellness Center looked up as an impeccably dressed man entered the quiet lobby. "Welcome." Lorenzo removed his sunglasses. "I'd like to schedule a massage." She smiled professionally. "Do you have a preferred therapist?" He answered almost immediately. "Lily." The receptionist checked the schedule. "She's available in 20 minutes. He nodded. "I'll wait." Inside the treatment room, Lily finished preparing fresh towels before hearing a knock. "Come in." The door opened quietly. She recognized neither the footsteps nor the breathing. "Good afternoon," she greeted warmly. "I'm Lily. It seems we've never met before." Lorenzo paused. "No, I don't believe we have." She smiled. "Please make yourself comfortable." He removed his jacket and lay face down on the massage table. For several moments, neither of them spoke. Then Lily gently placed her hands across his shoulders. She immediately frowned. "You're carrying an incredible amount of tension." Lorenzo almost laughed. If only she knew. "I suppose work has been busy." Her fingers slowly worked across muscles hardened by decades of pressure, responsibility, and violence. "You don't sleep much." It wasn't a question. He answered honestly. "No. You should. I'll try." "You won't." The corner of Lorenzo's mouth lifted slightly. "No, I probably won't." For the first time in months, someone had spoken to him without calculating every word. There was no fear, no hidden agenda, only simple conversation. Lily continued working quietly before speaking again. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Do many people depend on you?" He opened his eyes. "What makes you think that?" She smiled faintly. "Your shoulders. My clients who care only about themselves carry stress differently. You," she pressed gently along his upper back, "carry everyone else's problems." The room became completely still. Those words reached somewhere few people had ever touched. Lorenzo had spent 20 years protecting an empire. Every decision determined who lived, who died, who prospered, who disappeared. Millions respected him. Thousands feared him. Not one person had ever looked beyond the armor. Until now. "You must remember something," Lily said quietly. "What?" "If you keep carrying everyone forever," she paused, "eventually there won't be enough of you left." The sentence lingered between them, long after she finished speaking. When the session ended, Lorenzo stood and reached for his wallet. Before he could hand her the money, Lily laughed softly. "The front desk takes care of payment. I almost forgot. People usually do after relaxing." He looked at her for several seconds. "Thank you." She tilted her head. "For the massage. For reminding me that I'm human." She smiled politely, assuming he was simply being kind. "I hope your shoulders feel better." He almost answered, "They already do." Instead, he simply nodded and walked toward the door. As it closed behind him, Lily called after him, "Don't work too hard." He stopped for a brief moment. No one had said those words to him in years. That evening, Marco entered Lorenzo's office, carrying several confidential reports. He immediately noticed something unusual. His boss was sitting in silence, not reviewing financial statements, not planning security operations, not negotiating alliances. Instead, he was absent-mindedly staring at a business card from the Harmony Wellness Center. Marco blinked. "Another appointment, boss?" Lorenzo placed the card inside his desk drawer. "Tomorrow?" Marco raised an eyebrow. "You've never voluntarily gone to physical therapy before." Lorenzo answered without looking up. "I'm not going there for therapy." "For what then?" A faint smile, so rare that Marco almost questioned whether he had imagined it, crossed Lorenzo's face. "For peace." Lorenzo returned. Then he came back again, and again. The appointments never followed a predictable schedule. Sometimes he appeared after 3 days, sometimes after a week. Occasionally he arrived twice within the same week, always under a different name, arranged by his security team. The wellness center staff assumed he was another successful businessman struggling with exhaustion. Only Lorenzo knew the truth. For 1 hour inside Lily's treatment room, he wasn't a mafia boss. He wasn't a billionaire. He wasn't the man whose signature could bankrupt corporations or start wars between criminal families. He was simply a tired man whose shoulders hurt. And somehow, that hour became the only peaceful part of his week. Lily, of course, never realized who he truly was. She recognized him only by 3 things: the steady rhythm of his footsteps, the faint scent of cedarwood on his jacket, and the quiet calm in his voice. "You came back," she said with a warm smile as he entered one rainy afternoon. "I did. I'm beginning to think you're ignoring my advice." "What advice?" "Working less." A quiet laugh escaped him. "You remember everything." "I have to." She tapped lightly against her temple. "When you can't rely on your eyes, you learn to trust everything else." As Lorenzo settled onto the massage table, Lily paused before beginning. "You slept a little better." "You can tell? Your breathing changed." He shook his head with quiet disbelief. "My doctors never noticed that. Doctors usually listen for illness." She smiled. "I listen for people." Those simple words stayed with him long after the appointment ended. Weeks passed. Without realizing it, they began talking more than they did during the first sessions. Lily told stories about children she met through disability outreach programs. She laughed about accidentally watering a plastic plant for 2 months because a friend forgot to tell her it wasn't real. She admitted she still occasionally reached toward sunsets she could no longer see because she remembered exactly where they used to appear. "I suppose memories don't become blind," she said. Lorenzo listened more than he spoke. When she asked about his work, he answered carefully. "I manage a very large organization." She chuckled. "I already guessed that." "Really? You apologize too little." He looked confused. "What does that mean?" "People with too much responsibility start believing everything is urgent. They interrupt themselves. They answer phone calls during conversations. They carry stress home. You do all 3. He smiled, despite himself. "You've analyzed me thoroughly." "It's my job." "No." She gently pressed one shoulder. I think it's because no one else tells you to slow down. For the first time in years, Lorenzo had no reply. Meanwhile, whispers had begun spreading throughout New York's elite circles. The mysterious businessman visiting the charity wellness center wasn't as anonymous as people believed. Someone recognized one of Lorenzo's security vehicles parked outside. Another spotted Marco waiting across the street. Rumors multiplied overnight. Why would Lorenzo De Luca repeatedly visit such an ordinary place? Was someone hiding there? Was he negotiating? Planning something? Watching someone? No one guessed the truth. He simply wanted another conversation with a woman who never cared who he was. Unfortunately, not everyone had forgotten Lily Anderson. One afternoon, as she finished work, a sleek black sports car stopped beside the sidewalk. The driver's door opened. A sharply dressed man stepped out, wearing an expensive watch and an expression filled with confidence. "Lily?" She froze. She knew that voice. Not because she wanted to remember it, because pain has an excellent memory. "Ethan, so you still recognize me?" "I recognize everyone's voice." Several uncomfortable seconds passed. "You look, well," Ethan said awkwardly. "I am. I heard you're still working here. I enjoy my work." He laughed softly. "I always admired your optimism." She remained silent. Years earlier, that same voice had sounded very different. Back then, Ethan had promised forever, promised marriage, promised children, promised that nothing would ever separate them. Then came the accident, the darkness, the hospital room, and finally, his words, "I can't spend my life taking care of someone who'll never see me again. You've become a burden." Those sentences had hurt far more than losing her eyesight. Now, standing on the sidewalk years later, Ethan sounded almost cheerful. "I've been thinking about you." "I haven't been thinking about you." The answer was calm, not angry, simply honest. His smile faded. "I made mistakes. We both made choices. Lily, I need to go." She carefully unfolded her white cane. Ethan reached toward her arm instinctively. She stepped back before he could touch her. "I know how to get home." Then she walked away, slowly, confidently, without looking back. Ethan watched her disappear into the evening crowd. For reasons he couldn't explain, being ignored by the woman he had once discarded unsettled him far more than he expected. A week later, New York's largest medical charity announced its annual fundraising gala. Television personalities, corporate executives, judges, celebrities, political donors. Everyone important would attend. The organizers also invited Lily in recognition of her volunteer work supporting rehabilitation programs for visually impaired patients. She almost declined. Large events exhausted her. Emma smiled. "You deserve one evening where people appreciate what you've done. I don't really enjoy fancy parties." "You don't have to." Emma grinned. "Besides, I've already found you the perfect dress." Lily laughed. "You planned this, didn't you?" Months ago, across the city, Marco placed another invitation on Lorenzo's desk. The same charity gala. Lorenzo glanced at the embossed envelope. "I'm aware. They've requested your attendance." "They always do." Marco hesitated. "Lily Anderson will also be there." Silence. Then Lorenzo calmly closed the folder he had been reading. "What time does it begin?" Marco couldn't help smiling. 7 o'clock. "I'll attend." As Marco left the office, he quietly realized something extraordinary. His boss had accepted an invitation. Not because politicians would be there, not because influential investors expected him, not because rival mafia families would attend. He was going because one blind massage therapist would be in the room. Neither of them knew that, before the night ended, the past Lily had worked so hard to leave behind would return in front of hundreds of witnesses, and this time, she would not have to face it alone. The Grand Regency ballroom shimmered beneath towering crystal chandeliers, its polished marble floors reflecting thousands of lights like a field of stars. Every seat was occupied. Cabinet members exchanged quiet conversations with federal judges. Medical pioneers greeted philanthropists. Hollywood celebrities smiled for cameras, while billionaires discussed investments over champagne. Hidden among them were men whose names never appeared in newspapers, leaders of the country's most powerful mafia families. Everyone had come for the same charity gala. Everyone had also noticed something unusual. Lorenzo De Luca had arrived. Whenever he attended an event, conversations changed. People laughed more carefully. Business negotiations became shorter. Security personnel suddenly appeared more alert. His presence alone altered the atmosphere of an entire room. Tonight was no different. Dressed in an impeccably tailored black tuxedo, Lorenzo acknowledged greetings with polite nods, but offered little conversation. His attention seemed elsewhere. Marco noticed it immediately. "You're looking for someone." Lorenzo didn't deny it. His eyes quietly scanned the ballroom. Then, he saw her. Lily stood near one of the charity displays, wearing a deep, emerald-green dress that Emma had insisted she try, despite her repeated protests. She couldn't see the admiring glances surrounding her. She only knew people kept complimenting the dress. Emma laughed. "I told you. I still think it's too elegant." "Nonsense. You deserve to feel beautiful." Lily smiled gently. "I've learned beauty isn't something mirrors decide." Several women nearby overheard the sentence. One quietly lowered her eyes, unexpectedly moved. Lorenzo watched from across the ballroom. Without expensive jewelry, without designer accessories, without trying to attract attention, she somehow became the most unforgettable person in the room. Not because she demanded to be noticed, because she never tried. Marco followed his gaze. "So that's her." Lorenzo answered simply. "Yes, I understand now." "You understand what? Why you keep returning?" Lorenzo remained silent. For once, no explanation was necessary. The charity auction soon began. A famous television host stepped onto the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we celebrate resilience. We celebrate those who remind us that courage often appears in the quietest forms." Applause echoed across the ballroom. Several volunteers were invited onto the stage, including Lily. She hesitated. Emma gently squeezed her hand. "You've got this." Guided toward the microphone, Lily stood before hundreds of guests. "I don't usually enjoy speaking in front of crowds," she admitted with a nervous laugh. The audience smiled warmly. "But I know what it feels like when people assume your life ended because something difficult happened." She paused. "My eyesight ended. My life didn't." Silence filled the ballroom. "I've met children who think blindness means they'll never have careers. I've met parents who fear their sons and daughters won't ever be loved." Her voice softened. "I hope they discover what I did. People may lose many things, but dignity should never be one of them." For several seconds, no one applauded. Not because they weren't moved, because many were fighting back tears. Then the ballroom erupted into thunderous applause. Lorenzo never took his eyes off her. He had negotiated billion-dollar agreements. He had commanded armies of loyal men. Yet somehow, one ordinary woman speaking with quiet honesty possessed a strength no empire could buy. The applause had barely faded when another voice cut sharply through the room. "That's a beautiful speech." The warmth instantly disappeared. Lily recognized the voice before anyone else. Ethan. He approached confidently, holding a champagne glass as though the evening belonged to him. Several guests recognized him as a wealthy entrepreneur. Others simply watched with curiosity. Ethan smiled politely. But stories can be misleading. Emma frowned. What are you doing? I'm telling the truth. He turned toward the audience. Everyone admires Lily because they think she's inspirational. He laughed quietly. They don't know how manipulative she can be. A ripple of uncomfortable whispers spread across the ballroom. Lily stood perfectly still. She had heard this tone before. Years ago, right before he walked away forever, Ethan continued. She's very good at making successful men feel guilty. Sympathy opens a surprising number of doors. Gasps echoed throughout the room. Emma stepped forward. That's enough. No, Ethan smiled. I've watched this before. He looked directly at the audience. She knows exactly how to make wealthy people feel responsible for her. I've seen it. I lived it. The room grew painfully quiet. Some guests shifted awkwardly. Others exchanged uncertain glances. No one wanted to become involved. Lily lowered her head, not because she believed him, because she was suddenly exhausted. She had spent years rebuilding a life defined by courage instead of tragedy. And in less than 2 minutes, someone who had once promised to love her had reduced her to an object of pity again. Quietly, she reached for her white cane. I think I'll leave, Emma whispered urgently. You don't have to. I know. Lily forced a gentle smile. But I don't want this evening to become about me. She turned carefully toward the exit. Ethan wasn't finished. You see? He called loudly. Running away. That's what she always does. Several cameras turned toward Lily. Whispers intensified. Reporters exchanged curious looks. Some guests appeared uncomfortable. Still, no one defended her. Not one person. Until Ethan reached forward and grabbed Lily's wrist. You don't get to pretend you're the victim. The ballroom froze. Lily instinctively tried to pull away. Please let go. Instead, his grip tightened. You fooled everyone else. You won't fool me. Then, a calm voice emerged from behind him. So, you've chosen to touch someone who asked you not to. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Every conversation stopped. Every bodyguard standing along the ballroom walls straightened simultaneously. Several mafia leaders immediately lowered their eyes. They knew that voice. Slowly, Ethan turned around. Standing only a few feet away was Lorenzo De Luca. His expression was perfectly calm, which somehow made him infinitely more terrifying. Without raising his voice, without making a threat, he looked directly at Ethan's hand, still wrapped around Lily's wrist. Then he spoke 6 words that seemed to drain every ounce of confidence from the room. Remove your hand. Now. Ethan's fingers released Lily instantly. The silence that followed was heavier than any scream. For the first time that evening, the entire ballroom finally understood exactly whose quiet presence had remained beside Lily all along. The ballroom fell into a silence so profound that even the orchestra stopped playing. Hundreds of eyes shifted between Ethan Brooks and Lorenzo De Luca. Only moments earlier, Ethan had believed he controlled the room. Now, standing only a few feet from the most feared man on the East Coast, he suddenly realized every confident word he had spoken had been heard by someone whose judgment carried consequences far beyond embarrassment. Still unwilling to surrender his pride, Ethan forced a smile. There seems to be a misunderstanding. Lorenzo's expression never changed. There isn't. His voice remained calm, almost gentle, which frightened everyone present even more. Marco quietly stepped beside him, but Lorenzo raised one finger. No one else would speak. This was personal. Lily stood between them, confused by the overwhelming silence. She recognized Lorenzo's voice immediately. You came. A faint smile softened his face. I did. She lowered her voice. I'm sorry. For what? I think tonight has become very uncomfortable. Several guests exchanged stunned glances. The woman had no idea that one of the most powerful men in America had just stepped forward on her behalf. She was apologizing to him. Lorenzo answered softly, "You've done nothing wrong." Those 5 words reached far beyond Lily. Many people in the ballroom suddenly realized that they had remained silent while an innocent woman had been humiliated. Ethan cleared his throat. "I don't know what she has told you." "Nothing," Lorenzo interrupted. "I know because I listened." Ethan frowned. "You don't understand who she really is." "No." Lorenzo looked directly into Ethan's eyes. "You don't." The confidence slowly disappeared from Ethan's face. He laughed nervously. "You've only known her a short time. I knew her character the first day we met. You couldn't possibly." "I watched a blind woman apologize because she thought she had inconvenienced me. I watched her worry about broken glass while dozens of armed men surrounded her. I watched her spend months helping complete strangers without asking for anything in return." He took one slow step forward. "And I watched you try to destroy her because she rebuilt the life you abandoned. Not a single person moved. Even photographers forgot to press their cameras." Ethan swallowed. "She wants powerful men to protect her." Lorenzo almost looked disappointed. "No, you wanted someone convenient. She wanted someone kind." The words struck Ethan harder than any insult. His face flushed. "You don't know what it's like." "I know exactly what it's like," Lorenzo answered quietly. "I know what fear looks like. I know what manipulation looks like. I know what loyalty costs." He paused. "And I know love." Another silence settled across the ballroom. One by one, people lowered their eyes. Because every sentence Lorenzo spoke sounded less like an accusation and more like an undeniable truth. He turned toward Lily. Very carefully, he reached for her hand. He never grabbed it. He simply offered his own. Lily smiled as soon as her fingers found his. She trusted his voice long before she knew his name. Slowly, he guided her one small step closer. The movement was so gentle that many guests found themselves unexpectedly emotional. This feared Mafia Boss, the man whose enemies described him as merciless, handled her hand as though it were the most precious thing he had ever touched. He looked toward the audience, toward politicians, toward billionaires, toward judges, toward celebrities, toward rival mafia leaders. Then he spoke. "She has never seen my face." No one breathed. But she saw my heart, before anyone else ever did. Several women quietly wiped tears from their eyes. A veteran judge removed his glasses. Even Marco, who had served Lorenzo for more than 20 years, looked away for a moment. Because he knew. His boss had never spoken that honestly in public. Lorenzo turned back toward Ethan. "You left." Because she lost her sight. The sentence echoed through the ballroom. Then came the words no one would ever forget. I stayed, because she helped me find mine. Complete silence. Not dramatic silence. Sacred silence. The kind created when everyone present realizes they are witnessing a moment that will remain with them forever. Lorenzo gently lifted Lily's hand. Without hesitation, he placed it over his heart. She felt the steady rhythm beneath her fingertips. Strong, calm, certain. He leaned slightly closer. Only she could hear the softness in his voice. Home. A single tear escaped down Lily's cheek. Not because she felt rescued, because for the first time since the accident, someone had chosen her completely. Not despite her blindness. Not because they pitied her. But because they truly saw her. The ballroom erupted. Hundreds of guests rose to their feet almost simultaneously. Applause thundered beneath the crystal chandeliers. Some people openly cried. Others simply stood in respectful silence. Reporters captured every second. Within hours, The images would spread across every major news network in America. The headlines would not celebrate Lorenzo's power. They would celebrate his words. She saw my heart before anyone else ever did. Those 9 words would become the most quoted sentence of the evening. Ethan stood alone. No one approached him. Business associates quietly stepped away. Several investors who had planned future partnerships suddenly excused themselves. A politician who had been speaking with him only minutes earlier walked in the opposite direction. Without anyone saying a word, his reputation collapsed. Not because Lorenzo threatened him, because everyone had witnessed the truth for themselves. There was no recovering from it. Months later, a quiet announcement surprised the country. A new charitable foundation had been established. It funded guide dog programs, accessible workplaces, scholarships for visually impaired students, career training, independent living initiatives. When reporters asked who inspired the project, the answer appeared on every official document. The Lily Anderson Foundation. When journalists asked Lorenzo why he had placed someone else's name above his own, he answered with his usual calm simplicity, "Because she taught me that real strength deserves to be seen." Despite everything that had changed, Lily refused to stop working. Every Tuesday and Thursday, she still welcomed clients into the same wellness center. She insisted on earning her own living. Her co-workers joked that marrying one of the richest and most powerful men in America had changed absolutely nothing. She still arrived early, still remembered every client's favorite music, still thanked every volunteer personally. Lorenzo never tried to change that. In fact, he admired her even more because of it. One quiet autumn evening, they walked together through a peaceful city park. Golden leaves rustled beneath their feet. Lily held his arm, smiling as a cool breeze brushed across her face. After a long silence, she laughed softly. "People keep telling me you're incredibly handsome." Lorenzo smiled. "So I've heard. Does it disappoint you? That I'll never know?" He looked at her with quiet affection. "I've wondered that." She gently squeezed his hand. "I already know." He tilted his head. "Know what?" "You've always been beautiful, where it matters." For perhaps the first time in his life, Lorenzo De Luca found himself unable to answer. Not because he had nothing to say. Because some moments become perfect only when words finally surrender to silence. Together they continued walking into the fading evening light. She had never fallen in love with his face, his fortune, or the fear his name inspired. She had fallen in love with the man hidden beneath them all. And in return, the man who ruled an empire finally discovered the one person who had seen his true worth, without ever seeing his appearance.